What is the fastest way you've seen someone ruin their life? A former acquaintance was playing around with a homemade crossbow that I'd helped him with. I was massively into archery and fletching, and he seemed serious about it. I typically made him leave it with me because it was a dangerous weapon. I have an explanation. He kinda didn't. Anyway, to quote, convince his parents to let him join an archery club, he wanted to show off the crossbow we made. I thought it was a decent plan, so let him take it without any ammo. Turns out he was gaming me to get more playtime with his favorite toy, had gotten a hold of some bolts, and was fricking around shooting his shed a fair bit. He somehow ended up firing a bolt that missed the shed completely, passed between the slats on his fence, and hit his neighbor's daughter. She hasn't walked since. He got messed up real bad by her unstable older brother. They both did jail time. Acquaintance was disowned and ended up homeless, and now I'm not sure where they are in life. Wait, hold up. Through the fence? That sounds like something out of Final Destination. Sorry to hear it, though. Story 2. I had a friend a few years back, always kind of an odd guy, but he had a good heart. Anyway, one day I was hanging out with him and a few other friends, and he told us he was going to get a tattoo tomorrow and had this super cool idea. But he wouldn't tell us what it was because he wanted it to be a surprise. We saw him about a week later. He had tattooed 3/4 of his face green, like no other design or anything, just solid dark forest green. Basically, he just left the top right quarter of his face normal and the rest was all green. He had been immediately fired from his job the day after getting the tattoo. I kinda lost touch with him shortly after that since he moved to another city. I'd heard he wound up living in his car. No idea why he did what he did. He'd had a very good job in IT at a pretty big company and was making decent money. No clue why he thought permanently turning 3/4 of his face green would be super awesome. Story 3. In the Air Force, this new guy joins and goes out to a bar, then decides to drive home, gets a DUI, loses all of his rank, has to pay a ton in fines, but leadership fought for him and he was allowed to stay in the Air Force. 2 months later, as he's paying tons of lawyer and legal fees, he does something really stupid. Drives home from the same bar, intoxicated, and gets arrested. Loses his license and gets kicked out of the military, so loses all of his income while he's thousands of dollars in debt. That's not even the worst part. A few months later, he celebrates being a civilian again by, you guessed it, going to the same bar, then driving home intoxicated, arrested, and put in jail for a while. I can't imagine he has many future career opportunities with a less than honorable discharge and an arrest record. Story 4. Less than 24 hours, my ex-neighbor's ex-girlfriend went on a racist road rage rant that got filmed. It went viral on Twitter. I remember reading the news article and thinking about her for some reason. She wasn't named. It wasn't until months later that I found out it was her. She was fired from her $3,000 a year job the next day and immediately started getting death threats. She had to move in with her boyfriend. She tried getting a job, but people would look her up and be like, what the heck? She spent $10,000 on a reputation defender, changed her name, and was shunned by many family and friends. Her boyfriend, who she wanted to marry, broke up with her because he couldn't stand the months of depression. She ended up leaving the state. Story 5. I was a licensed firearms owner in Canada, and I sold a handful of guns to my dealer when I was still smoking a few years back, and it caught up to me 3 years after I got sober. I'm going to court for sentencing in a couple of months, with the prosecutor seeking 6 to 8 years. And although it may not seem like that much in the grand scheme of things, but since I quit smoking, I got my driver's license, started my own construction business, and I'm in a 4-year relationship with an amazing woman who was the reason for my getting sober. All of that is going to be gone, and my grandpa, who was the only family who raised me I have left, will likely be gone because of him being 84. I'm not sure where you would count the life being ruined. The second I made the decision to sell the firearms, the second the RCMP and local police pulled me over with 20 cars in morning rush hour, my name being put in the newspaper with my crime, or when I get sentenced in a few months, I've decided it was the second I made the decision. Story 6. It helps to be insane. I say that as someone who is certifiably bonkers. I worked with an engineer at a manufacturing facility at one point in my career. We'll call him Bob Dobbs. We had defense-related contracts with major players like Boeing. It was not this man's job to design anything, but to do manufacturing stuff. At some point within a year of my arriving, he began answering the phone with customers as Bob Dobbs, engineering manager, and insisting that all communication go through him. He got away with this for nearly 3 months until someone called the actual engineering manager asking for Bob Dobbs, the engineering manager. Due in no small part to the what the heck involved, a review of Bob Dobbs' work began. He had been, quote, redesigning/optimizing customer designs before they went to production. There was almost $1 million of scrap sitting on the shop floor. He was terminated and began a career delivering pizza. Story 7. My stupid ex-girlfriend, in an effort to pay back a loan shark, maced the opening manager of a Blockbuster and stole the bank deposit bags. Then she went and picked up her niece and nephews, all under age 8, and casually drove around with them. She got felony stopped on a major roadway. Her photo was on the top stories at 10 lead-in to that evening's news. This happened during the NBA Finals that year. I think it was during Game 6 or Game 7, so huge viewing audience. Oh, she was easily recognized and apprehended because her best friend was the store manager of that Blockbuster, and she was there all the time. And she had dropped off an application the day before. She spent the next 3 years in a women's prison. Story 8. Worked in the German social welfare system. A client of mine said he thinks that my calculations would be wrong after his wife left him because he got not enough money. I asked him if he had any expenses I didn't know of. He was sure. He gave me all info. I asked him to bring me all his invoices, vouchers, receipts, etc., which he did a few days later. I read all his papers and found a pay slip that I didn't know of. According to my files, he got social welfare at this time, and I had no info that he had a job with income, which would be social welfare fraud. I kept reading and I found a so-called Versicherungspolice and insurance policy for a 5 Series BMW. You should know that back in the day, a car was a, quote, salvageable capital, aka he had to have his car sold to use that money for groceries, etc. It was the mid-90s, it's different now. Then I found the purchase contract for the car, expensive and with installment payments. Then I found the contract with the bank that gave him the loan for the car. So I called the bank and asked them why the hell they are giving a loan that big to an unemployed social welfare recipient. The woman from the bank began to panic because that's new information to her. And while she was trying to explain what happened, the loan had fallen through because my client didn't pay, etc. I figured out that something is wrong with the payslip. You should know that in Germany, the 4-digit postal code, including the sublocal code like 1000 Berlin 44, was changed to a 5-digit postal code 12345 Berlin in 1993. The payslip was from 1995, but the postal code on that thing was from 1993. He forged the payslip to get the loan to get the car because his wife told him he needed a better car to keep her. So he did all of this, but the bubble burst because he couldn't afford to pay the installments. And just because he asked me to recalculate him and brought all his info without sorting them out properly, I was able to prove that he committed some felonies, which, by the way, doesn't mean that he ends up in jail or that he gets arrested, etc. He told me the story. I said what I have to do now and what might happen in the next few weeks. Both have been charged and convicted of social welfare fraud, insurance fraud, falsification of documents, and obtaining bank loans using fake income information. Story 9. A guy I went to high school with thought he'd make good bank selling his medical dextroamphetamines to other school kids, no matter what the age. He used to say, quote, "Dad says ADHD is a quack science, but Mom gets them for me anyway, so whatever." One of the local gangs found out he was dealing on the sly in their turf. He saved himself from a hospital trip by agreeing to deal for them and help mule stuff into the local federal prison. He thought he could get away with it because his father was a CEO there. He forgot he lived in a small town, and some local he supplied there eventually ratted him out to save themselves. Idiot's son was charged and caught a 10-year sentence. Didn't matter, he was 17, he was done. Father barely saved his job after it was confirmed he was innocent and not involved. He was very lucky to hush up the whole thing with a union behind him. Son was disowned, wore all the blame, and is a pariah now to anyone who ever knew him. Story 10. My sister's husband. First, this guy was completely worthless and a liar. You know how you can meet someone and instantly know just by looking in his face that he's scum? That was him when I first met him. My sister moved in with him, got pregnant from him, married him. Almost 3 years ago, they were still married and raising 2 daughters. They got evicted, but managed to somehow find a new place to move into. Amazing given how most apartments will not rent to you if you've ever been evicted, and within 3 months they were getting evicted again. Now, he had a job when they were dating. At this point, their oldest daughter is 15 years old, almost 16, and she has no memory of her dad ever having a job. His solution to avoiding eviction was to tell my sister to call everyone in her phone's contact list and beg for money while he did some substances and got intoxicated. Explains why they had no money for rent. She called our stepbrother's wife, a woman who makes well into the 6 figures. She could loan you $5,000 faster than a payday loan company. She and I get along great, but I never ask her for money. We aren't close enough for that, even though she'd probably be willing. Our stepmom told her not to do it. They are in this mess because of their bad choices, and to let them figure out the solution on their own. Then stepmom called me and told me about my sister begging for money and not to loan 1 red cent. I bailed my sister out of jail the year before, and she didn't believe that she should pay me back the bail money. I learned not to give my sister any money. 2 hours later, I was visiting the ER to see my sister. When the family refused to bail my sister and her family out of their situation, my sister's husband snapped. She harmed my sister until she passed out. My sister says that she believed that she was going to pass away at that point. When the 15-year-old daughter saw this, she grabbed a sword and was going to end him. He knocked the sword from her and harmed her. He was arrested while yelling angrily and asking for anyone to end him. He remained in jail until his trial. No one bailed him out. Some were willing to until they learned what he did. Then they decided that he was best left behind bars. The state, Texas, wanted 25 years for the savage, almost animalistic attack on my sister, as well as the attack on the daughter. Since he had no prior arrests, he was sentenced to a 6-month boot camp-like program, followed by parole upon successful completion of the program. He was also ordered to go through counseling as well as anger management. A restraining order was put against him from my sister and their kids. Double felon who can't own any form of weapon, on probation for like 10 years where if he messes up, he can get his parole taken away and go back for the full 25 years. Not only can't he own a weapon, but there is random testing. He has to pay for the testing, his monthly PO visits, pay child support, as well as restitution on top of monthly bills such as rent and utilities. Every so often, I search his name to see what pops up. He's been arrested a few more times. One was over the course of Thanksgiving the first year after he completed the program. And last year, he was picked up for public intoxication and giving the arresting officer a false name. He hasn't paid any money in child support, nor has he made any effort to see. He is allowed chaperone visitation or even contact them. Direct contact is not allowed, but they can go through lawyers. Story 11. I am friends with a guy and through him knew his younger sister. Smart, pretty, cool. She was doing well in college, meets a guy and decided to get married after a few weeks without telling anyone. So she moves in with him and all of a sudden he has too much back pain to work. So she's trying to take classes and support them both. He lays around all day, smoking grass, which she buys for his pain, while she does school and waits tables all night. She also likes to party with him. It's revealed they've both been doing a lot of substances. She, of course, drops out of college a few credits short of graduating. By this point, her parents and friends are begging her to come to her senses and take their help to get back and finish college. Invite both of them to move in and do all the substances they want as long as she finishes school. Her and the husband decided these student loans plus both his and her car loans are too much, so they parked the cars at the bank with notes in the windshield that they do not want them anymore and disappeared. They left a note for her parents that they were moving, quote, out west or to Mexico, and haven't been heard from in over 15 years. My friend heard rumors that the guy was using his sister at one point, but that was after they left that he heard, too late to do anything. About 5 years ago, he told me he thinks she's probably gone, but the parents are expecting her to come back any day now. The parents used to be joyous people. Story 12. This one is a bit more tragic, I say. There was this guy I knew years ago, by all accounts, doing pretty well for himself. Job, girlfriend, house, nice little sports car, the whole shebang. Well, one evening, he's out for a drive on a country road and he's speeding. The car goes into the dirt next to the road and he tries to correct, which unfortunately fails. The car goes into a field, flips over, and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He didn't make it. All of that happened within a span of a few seconds. Story 13. I work at a shelter. We had this one kid living with us. His parents abandoned him when he was 6, so the people and kids living and working at the shelter were all the family he had left. In the months before his 18th birthday, he made some serious debt, so we gave him the chance to stay longer with us to pay everything off before moving out. But this guy was kind of stupid, and so on the day of his 18th birthday, he signed a lease for a flat where he lived together with a girlfriend and kids of an older friend against all of our advice. At least he got a caretaker for his finances, so we thought things might eventually turn out okay, but we were wrong. He ignored the caretaker's calls, threw a party where he gave strong alcohol and got kicked out eventually. Then he lost his job, then the friend who took him in after said party kicked him out. And he is still in debt without work or a home just because he thought he was smart and didn't want to live under our rules once he turned 18. Story 14. I had a friend, my old and first best friend in middle school. We were closer than my actual brother, and same for him. He was without a doubt my rock, and I was his. He was a very, very good and talented marching drummer in general. The dude was learning college licks and rudiments at a top tier level in literal hours. It was incredible. He got to play with UCLA's and USC's drumline at 14 and didn't miss a beat with them. His mom unfortunately passed away when he was 15. He turned to heavy substances, an insane amount of drinking, and being with many people. I recently saw him in the beginning of March, and I won't lie, I did not even recognize him. It took me a solid 30 seconds to realize who it was that was calling my name. Extremely skinny, bags under his eyes, greasy hair, and dirty teeth. I felt terrible. I couldn't do anything, but what could I do? He ran away from home, dropped out of school, wasn't on any social media, had no contact with family, and honestly, had no family at all because his dad, aunt, two extremely distant cousins, and a brother in the Marines. I haven't seen or heard from him since. He could have passed away, and I wouldn't have known. Story 15. Where I live, we have a lot of high schools very close to each other. I'm not sure if this is normal, but it is an important detail. To save time, I'll call my school S1 and the neighboring school S2. S2 got an anonymous tip that a student was planning to attack the school the next day. Everyone that went to or worked at S2 got a day off. S1, however, was not closed. Some people complained that it wasn't fair, total nonsense, and that we should have gotten a day off as well. Fast forward to the next day at 5 a.m., I get a text saying school would be closed that day. We were in the winter months, so a snow day wouldn't be unusual. I noticed there wasn't any snow though, so I texted my friend asking if he knew anything about what was going on. He said no, so I went back to bed, woke up a couple of hours later with no follow-up text from the school, so I looked to see if there was anything about the closure on the news. Apparently, a girl who went to my school, S1, had made an Instagram post saying that they were going to commit an act of violence in the lower commons the next day. She did this because she wanted a day off, and I really hope she enjoyed it because that was the last time she'll be free for a very long time. She was charged and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Story 16. A couple of guys I knew in college were Division I athletes, but for a niche sport nobody really followed. One day they got intoxicated and decided it would be a great idea to bleach their initials into the AstroTurf on the football field. Really bad idea, but it got so much worse. Turns out bleach and AstroTurf create a chemical reaction, fire. They burned down the entire field of a Division I football stadium, caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages, made national news. It was bad. Everybody thought they did it on purpose, like some kind of act of vandalism. Their only defense was, no, we're not vandals, we're just idiots. The saddest part was they got expelled from college in their senior years, didn't graduate, and kind of descended into a difficult situation almost immediately. Typing this is bumming me out. And if you're learning a thing or two from these stories so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 17. Not a few seconds or minutes like some of these, and definitely not in as critical of a situation as some of the other stories, but my best friend growing up was not at all going to pursue more than a job he could get with only a high school education. He lucked out and found a job in a wholesale electrical parts warehouse. Turns out he has a natural affinity for driving big delivery trucks and maneuvering them into position better than anyone at the warehouse. He went from minimum wage to $16 an hour within 6 months. Then he was bumped up to an in-house position cutting wire, and that came with a massive raise to $23 an hour. He was slated to be promoted to one of the 2 manager positions at the warehouse, which would have bumped him to $26 an hour with a yearly raise of $2 until the ceiling of $30. Too bad he refused to give up smoking grass. I have nothing against substance use, but if you work at a place you feel connected to, as he did, and they have a no substance policy, it doesn't matter if it's legal or not legal. If you break policy, they're going to find out and you're toast. It doesn't matter if you think it's dumb. If you care about your job, stop doing the thing that breaks policy. My buddy wasn't immediately fired when he was screened, but he was supposed to be, because he was one of their best employees and got along with everyone, because he always came to work prepared and early, didn't come to work spiked or have any negative or noticeable habits that pointed to uncontrollable fixation in any regard. The owner of the company told him he would be randomly chosen in the next screening and plenty of time for his system to be cleared. He failed that one too, and was given a third chance anyway, and also failed that one. Now he is the manager of a Taco Bell working for a salary that amounts to about $8 an hour, 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, which also means he is legally not paid overtime rates. Definitely not as dire as some of the other stories here, but he went from plans to buy his first new car and apply for a home loan to living in the small micro apartment in his mother's backyard, living paycheck to paycheck. It's been about 4 to 5 years since, and he's still at that Taco Bell. Story 18. A few years ago in the Navy, I was serving as the officer of the day. For our shore command, this was basically a night watchman. Shortly after working hours, 2 young enlisted students came into the Master at Arms office where I was hanging out with my counterpart, a chief. P-test us right now, they said. We've been out in the car smoking grass all afternoon. We want out of the Navy. The chief immediately replied with, "Be quiet and get out of here right now, and I'll forget this all ever happened." "No, we want out. We're spiked as kites and want a test." After we took the samples, sealed them, etc., we sat there with these kids while the master at arms did the final paperwork, and the chief asked these kids, "Okay, what's the brilliant plan now?" "Well, now that I'm done with the Navy, I'm going to use my GI Bill to go back to college and be an engineer." Folks, being discharged for grass use can result in a less than honorable discharge, which means you don't get the GI Bill, and instead have roughly the equivalent of a felony conviction on your record for life. I watched as the chief explained that fact, and the kid's eyes darted to the already sealed and signed for container of his whiz that he could never get back. I watched the realization that he just picked up a severe infraction, by choice, when he had been offered every chance to walk away. He realized that more than half of his funding plan for college had just disappeared, along with his eligibility for lots of loan programs. That is a facial expression I will never forget. Story 19. I had an internship last year where during our onboarding, the company brass took everyone out to a rented bar with 2 drink tokens per person. Most of us were college students, so you were sure to have at least a couple of rambunctious types. The company warned us that, while we want you all to have fun, please remember to drink responsibly. People have ruined their internships with us in the past on this night. And most of us ended up having more than 2 drinks, but they had driven us there on coach buses, and they would return us to a nearby hotel afterwards, so we figured it was okay. Well, one guy definitely broke his personal limit, and what ensued was incredibly hard to watch. On the bus ride home, the kid started being obnoxiously loud. Then he stood up and started spouting off offensive nonsense, something about a conflict. Finally, the HR manager asked him very politely to sit down multiple times. This only upset the kid, who then threatened to harm the manager in the face. When we got back, the guy then tried to drive home intoxicated while the HR manager frantically tried finding him a designated driver. I don't know whatever came of that kid, but I'm sure his internship was over after that weekend. It's crazy how you can watch someone totally throw away their career. Imagine having to go back home and try explaining to your parent or guardian why you're there and not at your assignment. Story 20. My cousin was 42 when our family learned that he was going to pass away. He had cirrhosis from drinking. He also had 2 little girls. He had an alcohol problem for a while and had been warned before to stop by doctors. After we all learned the truth, he passed away about 2 weeks later. He lost his appetite, he forgot who he was and who we were. It's unreal watching someone so young go that way, so from our perspective, his life was ruined in 2 weeks. He was a vet and a police officer. He had the biggest, longest funeral procession full of police cars I've ever witnessed in my life. I named my son after him when he was born 1 month later. R.I.P. Warren Miller. Story 21. Forget it, I'm in the middle of this right now. The fastest you can damage your life is by not even giving life a try. I'm 35 years old and about to likely be homeless within the next year. I've never had any real life experience. I'm extremely morbidly obese, easily on the disability scale. I've never had a job other than helping my dad working with newspapers. I never kept in touch with any friends, so much so I completely avoided social interaction for 10 years after high school. Speaking of, I never got my high school diploma, even though I did actually put the extra work in for it, 1 extra year due to skipping, including summer, night, and Saturday school. So now that I'm 35, I finally feel the drive to change something, but to add another problem on top of it all, I don't even have a social security number, never had any kind of government help because of this. So I don't even know where to begin with life. I'm honestly probably going to end up gone before anything else changes, but you can definitely damage your life in the split second of never even having tried. Story 22. I've told this story before, but I recently found out where the girl is now. I went to high school with a girl who got pregnant about halfway through my 11th grade year. At the time, she was with a guy, and the guy claimed that he was indeed the father. Fast forward a couple of months into the pregnancy, and they break up, and the ex-boyfriend is now saying there's no way the kid is his, and that she was pregnant before they ever had intimacy. She refutes this, saying it has to be his kid because there's nobody else. She keeps trying to get the guy to admit that the kid is his, but eventually backs off because, in a bizarre turn of events, she gets with her ex's cousin. The baby is born while she's still with the cousin, and things seem to calm down until her and the cousin break up. She then starts claiming that the child is either her ex's and he should be paying child support, or that because she had been with the cousin, he should support her and the child. She's so convinced that she decided to take them both to court. The court runs paternity tests on both men and determines that neither was the father, and as such should not have to support her. Because of all this, she lost a lot of money from court fees, is a single mother who last I heard wasn't with anybody, and currently works at McDonald's. This all spiraled over the course of about 1.5 to 2 years. Story 23. One lunchtime, a few of us were sitting in the staff canteen just chatting, about 8 of us, a mix of white, black, and Asian. Someone made a comment about how they thought they'd find out who the refrigerator thief was. One of the white ladies said, "Well, we found the snake in the woodpile then, haven't we?" She was in her 40s, normally very sensible and liked by most people. There was a stunned silence before one of the black guys got up and just walked out, slowly followed by everyone else. And that afternoon, we all got called in for statements, and she was on quote-unquote sick leave the next day, sacked a couple of weeks later. She'd been in the same job for 20-odd years and was a supervisor in her department, now unemployed. Story 24. My cousin was spoiled as heck. My uncle was a millionaire lawyer and bought his relationship with his kids with money. He never had time for them. If they asked, he bought. Money was no object if he thought it made them love him. Cousin turned 16 and got a driver's license. He begged for a motorcycle even though he did not have a motorcycle license. My uncle bought him a brand new Kawasaki Ninja. My father pleaded with him about what a bad idea that was. 1 week later, he crashed with a girl on the back of the bike and they both passed away upon impact. No helmet or safety gear on top of it. Probably the fastest way someone ruined their life, my uncle and his son. Story 25. Streetcar racing in high school. Yes, illegally. My now husband and another friend we will call TF were setting up to race. DH's 69 Camaro ZL1 versus TF's 69 Camaro Fastback. TF decides to do a spin out in the parking lot. The blacktop was slick, he loses control, and slams into a crowd of our friends. A girl ended up being pinned between TF's car and a light pole. TF was 16 and sent to a juvenile facility until he was 20. He's been in and out of rehab since he was released. The girl was about 15 and lost both of her legs, one below the knee and the other mid-thigh. Her family moved out of Texas. Story 26. A beautiful friend I had. She took up with this good-looking, charismatic guy. She changed almost immediately, became unreliable, started missing shifts at work. We had kind of drifted apart a bit because I hated her boyfriend. He was too smarmy and smart-mouthed for me. My quote-unquote spider sense went into overdrive whenever he was around. He had started cutting her off from her friends. I went to see her one day after she had missed so many shifts at work. She was about to get fired. I looked around until I was sure he wasn't there. Then I knocked on the door. When she answered, she was a mess. She stank of sweat and something I couldn't identify. I barged into her flat and was so shocked at what I saw. She was so skinny. Her once lovely place was a filthy shambles now, trash everywhere, dirty clothes all over. I yelled at her, "What's going on? You're about to lose your job. You look like you've been struggling." And she started crying. Her boyfriend had introduced her to substances almost immediately after they met, and her life had spiraled out of control. She was fixated, and he was pushing her to sell herself because he couldn't afford to pay for her habit anymore. She wasn't eating properly, her diet was poor, and she was risking her life because she was a type 1 diabetic. I threw some clothes in a bag and dragged her out to my car. I took her straight to the hospital. She was in there for 3 weeks, detoxing while having her diabetes monitored so she didn't get too sick. I brought her home to my place. She'd been evicted from hers for non-payment of rent. I was so naive. She promised to never see him again, and I really thought that everything would be okay. 2 days later, I got home from work and found her on the bathroom floor. She coded. The needle was still in her arm, and it was such a waste. My beautiful, vibrant, kind friend passed away in less than 6 months after becoming a substance user. Story 27. A guy from my school went to rob a corner shop at knife point. He pulled up with his bicycle, went into the store, and threatened the shopkeeper with a knife to give him all the money in the register. The shopkeeper refused, and the robber was too afraid to do anything, so he grabbed a pack of gum and ran out. 20 minutes later, the robber realized he left his bike behind in his panic, so he went back to get it. This was at the same time the police were questioning the shopkeeper on the incident. They swiftly arrested him there and then. I think he got like 2 years for stealing gum at knife point. Story 28. A guy worked in my union for 37 years, 3 years from retirement with a nice pension and benefits. He decided one day he would try to fight another coworker. The guy told him flat out he wasn't going to fight him because getting fired and disbanded from the union wasn't worth it, but the dumb guy seemed to think his nonsense would get swept under the rug. Took one swing, punched him in the face across the table. Cops were there in what seemed like 5 minutes. Pensions gone, fired from the company, kicked out of the union, banned from all oil field work in his province. He won't retire for the rest of his life, so not only did he damage his entire future, he just made his last 37 years frickin' pointless. But he was a complete piece of work anyway, so forget him. Story 29. I didn't destroy my life, but I did lose a lot of money. To understand the story, you must understand that I was not getting my mail from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, PennDOT, because my physical address and post office were in 2 different zip codes. I notified them of this several times and they were not able to give me a solution. It started when I was pulled over in January. I let the citation sit on the counter for a couple of months and forgot about it. I picked it up and realized what I had done and tried to pay the ticket. The online service wouldn't work and I could not connect to any live body or leave a message with the county. I assumed there was a late fee, but I paid what was on the ticket because I didn't know what the cost was. I found out late that because I paid it late, there was a $25 late charge that was added, which I wasn't aware of. PennDOT suspended my license without notifying me. They tried, but I wasn't getting my mail from PennDOT because I didn't pay the $25 late fee. I never received notification of any of this and was pulled over about 6 months later. The officer had told me that my license was suspended and gave me a ticket for driving with a suspended license. I tried to plead innocent but never got my summons because PennDOT couldn't get my mail to me. When all this went down, we discovered the problem and they assured me that they fixed it in their system and we would have no further problems. Anyway, the penalty for driving with a suspended license was a year suspension. I lost my license for a year for not paying $25. I racked up over $10,000 worth of hotel costs, fines, and Uber fees over the next year. Most people would have kept on driving and lost their license longer. The bottom line was not paying a $25 ticket. Cost me over $10,000 and a year suspension. I contacted every state representative to try to fight it and had no success. My local rep even told me that the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation is known for lying. There is more ridiculousness to the story, but it's probably not interesting enough for this thread anyway. Story 30. I used to work as a bank teller. This is quite a few years ago now. A couple bought and won a lottery, $1.2 million. I was transitioning to an account manager at that time and was able to sit in on some of the financial planning meetings. We tried everything we could to get them to lock the money down, just in a normal locked account for 6 months, nothing crazy, to give them time to think and plan. They refused. Instead, they went shopping. These were not young people either. They were probably in their mid-50s. They gave their 2 adult kids about $100,000 each or something like that. Not only did all 4 of them blow all the money within a year, all 4 were in debt and in a financial situation worse than what they started with. Within the first 4 months, the mom had blown through about 50% of the money, if not more. She was having home shopping network packages delivered to the bank, multiples a week. She didn't want us to tell her husband. It was pathetic and sad to watch. Story 31. I went in for jury duty one day. After an hour or two, we were told anyone with a juror number XY can leave for the week. Everyone else has to stay. I was one of the people who got to leave, so I went up to the desk to collect my I really went to jury duty. I didn't just take a day off of work paper. I was maybe 5th in line because I was sitting close to the desk. This guy gets in front of the line of people and starts yelling at the clerk, giving out the papers. My time is more valuable than everyone else's here. You need to let me leave. I have very important business to attend to. Do you know who I am? Etc., etc., etc. The clerk was trying to ignore him, but the people in line didn't want to get close to him. The guy ends up reaching out and putting his hand on the clerk's shoulder. That was a mistake. 3 cops tackle this guy to the ground in no time and he's arrested for assaulting a civil servant. I can't imagine him keeping his very important job after a felony charge and definitely not getting another very important job. Probably 2 minutes max between getting called up and his arrest. Story 32. Our old C-level HR guy, married, rich, grandkids, nice. Honestly, he always seemed on top of the world. C-level of a super big company and well-respected, close to retirement age. The guy starts going on dates with a girl who works for him. She's about 20 years younger than him and a really wonderful person. Anyway, he falls for her, but she realizes she's not into him and cuts it off, but he keeps pursuing her. She finally goes to the other executives and explains what's happening. They come up with an agreement with her. She'll move to another part of the company, and he has to sign a disclosure saying he won't contact her while he worked at the company. They offer this to him and he says no, he's in love, he's too old to care anymore, and he's willing to give up everything for her. Finally, they fire the guy. His wife leaves him, he loses his stock options, his grandkids don't visit him. The girl blocked all contact from him, and this all happened within, 2 weeks? I've never seen someone just destroy their life like that. Story 33. I worked at a company with a bunch of construction type folk. The owner of the company threw a big Christmas party, and all these dudes got hammered and were doing substances all night. The owner had an after party at his house. I didn't attend the formal party or the after party. The party wrapped up around 6 a.m. The owner called Ubers for some of the guys. One of the intoxicated dudes bailed, took a company truck, and promptly smashed into a minivan, terminating a young girl and hospitalizing her mother and friend as they were on their way to figure skating practice. Half a dozen lives ruined in 10 minutes. Story 34. I've ruined my own life pretty well before when I was 18. Basically, my parents had recently divorced and my father had moved away. I quickly moved out of my mother's as soon as I had a job that could cover rent and I had enough for a bond. Being Mr. Popular, I started having massive parties in my flat, got pretty sucked into the life, and thought it would be impressive to unofficially make my slogan, forget it. Cool, right? To cut the story short, I started just not paying my rent and bills, spending money on nice clothes, substances, and alcohol. The whole time I was neglecting my family life, stopped talking to mom and dad, managed to work up quite a bit of debt and owing local dealers quite a bit of money. Eventually my boss got sick of me turning up for work late and spiked. It did get pretty ridiculous considering having a line was something I did after brushing my teeth before leaving for work to help counter me having not slept the night before. And one day, I popped out to pick up some grass and returned to find the locks changed on my flat door. All of my belongings were in there, all of my clothes, a 2,000-pound gaming rig, a lot of stuff with emotional value as well as actual value, my phone. The entire situation was difficult because I literally didn't know what to do. I had no job, no phone, nowhere to live, and only the clothes on my back. I walked to my mother's house to find she wasn't there, and basically just broke in through a slightly open window and lay on the carpet crying. Turned out she had gone on a 6-month holiday to the US. Anyway, so I lived off just eating my mother's food and had a few changes of clothes in the attic. Eventually, I worked up the courage to see if I could break into the flat and try to get some of my stuff. Managed to climb up the drain pipe and found the entire flat empty apart from my large, low-to-the-ground bed. And to my luck, my phone was still under my pillow. So I got out, headed down to the bank, and withdrew my last 40 pounds and canceled my card, ordering a new one to my mother's address. It was on my way back to my mother's. I met an old friend from school who invited me for a drink and a game of pool. I accepted, if anything, just to take my mind off of it all. Anyway, he asked how I was, and I kind of very casually explained how difficult my situation was. He very kindly offered for me to take a spare room at his place if I could find a job, and as long as I started paying back the dealers so we didn't have people smashing in the front door. I nodded, slowly, and turned to the woman behind the bar, asking if they were hiring. And after a brief conversation, the woman took me into the back room and had me sign a contract. Today, I have my own house, a mortgage, a good job, a girlfriend of 5 years, and a 1-year-old child. All my debts are paid, and I haven't touched substances for about 7 years, and I drink very rarely and have started reconnecting with my family. No matter how deep a hole you dig for yourself, you can always fix it. And if any of these stories got to you too, just like that last one for me, here's more for us. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. I'll catch you in that video.